Jews took a new religion as a substitute for Judaism, and that was, you name it, feminism, environmentalism, Marxism, socialism, communism. But Jews love isms, and it's a very sad development to me.
So he's talking about the secular Jews, but I mean the isms. They're the isms, exactly like you say. All of the revolutionary movements.
Yeah, there's a whole group of Jews now that are what you would call conservative, and they talk like this, and then they immediately start talking about Israel, but in a favorable sense. I just did an interview with Chuck Morse, who said pretty much the same thing. Yeah, except that when you get in a discussion with him, he says, well, they're not real Jews. I brought up Trotsky. Well, he's not a real Jew. Well, I said, Chuck, you're not the Pope. I mean, you can't excommunicate Jews. Trotsky was a Jew, and it was a perfect expression of his Jewish revolutionary spirit, the way he acted in the creation of the Soviet Union. There's a Russian documentary on Trotsky now on Netflix, which is really a good piece of work. And as a result, some people are trying to ban it. And in the Pale of the Settlement, at the same time that Dennis Prager is talking about, when all of these ideologies started to flood in from Europe, one of the ideologies was Zionism. So it's not as if Zionism is somehow completely different than communism. I mean, Zionism is Jewish nationalism. Communism is Jewish internationalism. They
were all Soviet Bolsheviks as well.
The Bolsheviks were internationalists. Trotsky was an internationalist. He hated the idea of Jewish nationalism. But Herzl was a Jewish nationalist. So you're talking about two different ideologies, which are both expressions of the revolutionary spirit. And it's not as if one is the antidote to the other. They're both expressions in different forms of the same Jewish revolutionary spirit. This group of people has a skewed idea of what is good. It's not my idea of what is good. It's not the majority culture's idea of what is good. It's not the Christian idea of what is good. It's basically always this kind of agitation to tear down some type of institution, like marriage in this instance, and then replace it with something that is ultimately Jewish and a rebellion against Logos.
And look at this article out just this week. Tory MP criticized for using anti-Semitic term cultural Marxism.
Cultural Marxism is a euphemism for Jew. This is, wait a minute. We're getting so far beyond here. I mean, this is the hedge around the Torah. What are we talking about here? Cultural. There were groups of people who were talking about the Frankfurt School and cultural Marxism. They used that term because they didn't want to use the word Jew. So now you can't use cultural Marxism. It's getting to the point where what are you allowed to use? What words are you allowed to use? And secondly, the bigger question is, who gave these people the right to say what language we're allowed to use?
Well, it's funny. You're not allowed to call them Jews, and then if you call it cultural Marxism, they say that that's not Jewish, so it's anti-Semitic to say it is, but they're basically like what they admit to in their denials. They don't understand what they're admitting to.
Right, and you're not allowed to say George Soros.
And I guess Soros isn't very Zionist, according to what he said in magazines. So they kind of made him to be the boogeyman of the left.
Yeah, we're in the middle of a kind of Jewish civil war here. We had this before with the whole Iran thing, where the liberal Jews supported the Iran deal and Likudniks opposed it. We were in the middle of the civil war there. Because they are so dominant in controlling the narrative, we're always in the middle of some type of Jewish civil war.
And then also why a lot of people are waking up to this information, I believe, which I do see everywhere in the comments now on the internet, is all of like how Trump's administration is just so over the top pro-Israel, and all of like the supposedly America First patriot media are just going over the top to shill for another country. What's your take on the state of the patriot so-called media in America right now?
Who are you talking about specifically?
I'm talking about like your Fox News, your InfoWars, Breitbart, Rebel Media, all those type of people, the real like MAGA Trump supporters that are all Zionist, essentially.
The narrative during the campaign was not Israel first. Trump actually said during the campaign that told the Jews don't give me your money, because if you give me money, you're going to control me. Now, what happened after he got elected was basically the deep state set in motion plan to destroy him. And I think the Mueller investigation has just been concluded, but that's now almost 2 years into his administration. Okay, it's over 2 years into his administration, mm-hmm. and I think it had a deformative effect on the administration. What he wanted, what he could do, what he could not do. He was talking about making peace with Russia at this point during the campaign. Well, as soon as the collusion with Russia thing entered the discussion, I think he felt constrained that he couldn't do anything. He couldn't lend any credence to that narrative. It effectively crippled his foreign policy toward Russia. It also created a situation, I think, in his mind, where he felt that the only people who were powerful enough to save him were the Jews. They're the only people who are powerful enough to turn the narrative around. Now, what happened here is not all the Jews were on board. So he had to go to the most extreme Zionist Jews around, namely the Likudniks. And so the culmination of this was, okay, you trash the nuclear agreement, you move the embassy, and then you've got the Golan Heights thing, which is just kind of a semantic change. But by the time you have the Golan Heights, now Netanyahu's in trouble here. And so you have this kind of this dance here of these two politicians who are fighting for their lives. They're like two drowning men in the ocean clinging to each other because they need each other to survive. Well, this had a completely I think it had a completely deforming effect on the Trump administration. Of course, I'm assuming that he was in some sense sincere when he was talking about America first, because that's the message that came across here in South Bend when he showed up for that campaign. But everything has been taken a backseat to Israel first. You know, everything, the whole foreign policy thing has just been screwed up. And maybe they're withdrawing now because they feel he can't fix it anymore. You had to have a Russian front man because they wouldn't sell to foreigners. But the Russian front men, it turns out, are all Jews. They're all Russian Jews. The Russian mafia is a Jewish operation. And so what happened here is that Trump at this point is going out of business. He's going bankrupt in Atlantic City. He's in way over his head. And then suddenly Jews from Russia with suitcases full of money start showing up, buying condominiums in Trump Towers, and they save him.
Yeah. And the Rothschild banker bailed him out, too, when he was billions in debt. Wilbur Ross, who was our commerce secretary now.
He appreciates, he likes to be loyal to people who have helped him. Mm-hmm. And so I think he felt a certain loyalty to the Jews because of what they did. And that's the narrative here. So he was saved by the Jewish mafia.
I think he was a made man even before he was saved. Did you know his father was friends with Netanyahu in the early 80s, and that Trump got the top Zionist award from the Jewish National Fund, which was founded by Theodore Herzl at the World Zionist Congress. In 1983, Trump got the Tree of Life award from the JNF.
Yeah. Well, you can't succeed in real estate in New York City unless you can deal with those people. So it's not surprising. It's not surprising.
But the new Rome, the United States, views itself as a new Jerusalem. We visited the original city on the hill. We visited the hill. There is no greater friendship than the one.
Okay, what do you think of that? So they think that America is the new Rome, and America thinks that America is the new Jerusalem, which you write about in your book about the Pilgrims.
The Puritans, yeah.
The Puritans.
Yeah, this goes way back. The United States was founded, at least the Massachusetts Bay Colony, was founded by Judaizers, Puritans, Christians who wanted to act like Jews, wanted to collect usury, and so on and so forth. He's right. It does go back to that. That's John Winthrop is the guy who came up with this idea of the city on the hill, that Massachusetts Bay was going to be the city on the hill. Ronald Reagan quoted this, and it's been part of American messianic politics from the beginning. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is this Jewish strain. The Jewish revolutionary spirit is in many ways alive and well through Puritanism in the United States. Mm-hmm. But I mean, let's go Rome. Wait a minute. Let's get this straight. What was he referring to? He was referring to the fact that the Jews rose up in rebellion against Rome, and the Romans came in and destroyed the temple. They destroyed the temple. That in 70 AD, that was the end of the Jewish religion. Okay, no priesthood, no sacrifice, no temple. Okay, and then they did it again. The Jews rebelled again 60 years later under Simon Bar Kokhba, and again the Romans came in and obliterated Jerusalem. There were church fathers that never even heard of Jerusalem, didn't know where it was.
About the pilgrims is Jerusalem. Salem, Massachusetts is based off of Jerusalem, and you wrote in your book that they debated for years if Hebrew should be the language and they should have the Torah be the law of the land and have Sabbath off and all this stuff. It's amazing. And then weren't they the ones that were doing the witch trials as well?
Yes, they were. So you had a group of people who came over here because nobody could stand them. England could not stand them after a while. They got rid. They hated Cromwell so much that they dug up his body and they lost his head, so nobody knows where his head is anymore. He thinks he controls the country. I went to high school a mile away from where Benjamin Netanyahu went to high school. We were both in the Philadelphia area during the 60s. Okay, so he goes back to Israel and say, I know how to play the Americans. I control them. I speak their language, and it's not true. It's wearing off. The Jews are abandoning Israel. It's become, their behavior has become so repugnant to decent people throughout the world that even the Jews are abandoning it. The most recent example being the gunning down of innocent women and children at the wall in Gaza in May. The United Nations condemned it as war crimes. You can't do this type of stuff and not expect some type of reaction. The same thing happened to the Philadelphia Society in the 80s. They got in there, people like Norman Podhoretz and Midge Decter got in and redesigned conservatism as neoconservatism. And then suddenly Russell Kirk, who's one of the founders of it, says, wait a minute, Tel Aviv is not the capital of the United States. And then they threw him out because he was an anti-Semite. So they come into your organization, take it over, redefine it, and then kick out the people who started it.
They say that's un-American and it's anti-Semitic to even acknowledge that the Israeli lobby exists.
Yeah, well, the problem is they don't ultimately control the narrative, because what you're seeing now is that AIPAC is becoming basically a Republican organization. And what that means is the end of bipartisan support for the state of Israel. This is all bad theology. This is all dispensationalist theology. The biggest supporters of Israel are the Christian Zionists. All of southern Indiana is Christian Zionist. Mike Pence was raised a Catholic, and then when he got political ambitions, he abandoned the Catholic faith and joined some type of Christian Zionist operation down there. You want to go to Scripture? We'll talk about the parable of the vineyard. That scripture, if you're a sola scriptura guy, then how do you explain this parable where the master leases it out, doesn't give it to this group of people, he leases it out to the people, and then he says, I want a return on my investment, so he sends people to them and they abuse them. They're not going to pay back the money that they owe the master, and finally sends his son and they kill him. Well, guess who the son was? The son is Jesus Christ. And the people who we're talking about are the Jews, and they abused their position as the chosen people, as the stewards of the vineyard, and so the master drove them out. They're gone. It's over.
So their covenant is over, and the new covenant is you don't need the temple, you don't need the sacrifices.
We are the children of Moses. This is the clear statement of Jesus Christ. This is traditional Christian theology, and the fact that some Scofield Bible comes along. Only in America could they take a con man like Scofield seriously. The Jews promote him in New York, and suddenly you have this bad theology determining our foreign policy. The Jews are going to have to wake up to this and realize, instead of just doubling down and blaming more and more people for anti-Semitism, why don't you check out your own behavior? Why don't you check out the effect of gunning down innocent women and children in Palestine and the Gaza Strip? Why don't you check out the effect that has on people's feelings towards you? instead of just blaming everybody for anti-Semitism.